In the news tonight, King Abdullah renews concern over the status quo of Al-Haram al-Sharif and the escalation of violence in Jerusalem's holy sites during a meeting in Amman with Czech Prime Minister Bohuslav Sobotka. Israeli soldiers shoot 2 Palestinian youths, one of them a schoolgirl who died of her wounds near the Ibrahimi Mosque, and continued claims that the youths attempted to stab security members. And British pilot Tracy Curtis Taylor, who set off an epic 13,000-mile solo flight from England to Australia earlier this month, arrives in Jordan on her first stop in an Arab country. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. His Majesty King Abdullah met here in Amman with Czech Prime Minister Bohuslav Sobotka, leading a high-level delegation on a visit to the kingdom. His Majesty and Sobotka discussed bilateral cooperation in the areas of defense, industries, tourism and other joint ventures. They also reviewed international efforts aimed at combating extremism and agreed on the need to have a comprehensive strategy to confront the threat of terror. On Syria, His Majesty renewed calls to the international community to support Jordan through a sustainable aid program so that the kingdom can continue to fulfill its humanitarian and ethical duty toward refugees. For his part, the Czech Prime Minister also spoke of the crisis facing Europe as a result of an influx of migrants and refugees, mostly from Syria, and that his country, with its limited resources, is doing towards those refugees. In a statement to the media at the outset of the meeting, His Majesty reiterated Jordan's religious and historic obligation towards Al-Aqsa Mosque and other sites in occupied Jerusalem. His Majesty also expressed deep concern over the escalation in tension and the violence in Jerusalem's holy sites. Sobotka, for his part, said his country is exerting every possible effort to push for a resumption of Palestinian-Israeli peace negotiations.
We're delighted to have you here. We have tremendous warm relations between our two countries, and this is an opportunity for us to enhance the already warm relations between our two countries. Your country in particular plays such an important role in the EU, and I believe that with the tremendous challenges that we are facing in the region, especially as we see with Palestine and Israel, and obviously in Syria, we'll have, I think, a lot to discuss today. I'd also like to point out that we're obviously been very concerned with the escalation of tensions in the holy sites in Jerusalem and the violence we've seen elsewhere. As Jordan, we take our historic and religious responsibilities for the entirety of the Haram al-Sharif, as well as the Muslim and Christian sites, extremely seriously. And so the return of the status quo for us is key. I heard the statements made by Prime Minister Netanyahu last night, and his affirmation of his commitment to uphold the status quo. This is a commitment that we welcome very much here, and we hope to see that those commitments are implemented on the ground. And I believe this will allow the violence to end, to decrease the tension, and I hope allow a resumption of efforts to readdress the core issues through negotiations, because this is an issue that has to be dealt with as quickly as possible. And I'm sure we'll have an ability to discuss this and obviously Syria. But I thank you for your presence here and the ability for us to be able to discuss the important relations between our two countries. And I welcome you.
Thank you. Vaši veliké možnost s panem předsedou vlády dnes ráno diskutovat zvýšené napětí, ke kterému teď dochází.
I thank Your Majesty for this possibility to meet here in Jordan. We already discussed with the Prime Minister today in the morning about the escalation of tensions and violence that is happening right now. I believe strongly that with the solutions that are hopefully coming, that we will lessen these tensions. And I'm very sad for the deaths of so many people on both sides. And I can assure you that we, as the Czech Republic, are doing our best to resume the negotiations for Palestinian and Israeli people. I think the two-state solution is the real peace process for both sides. Your Majesty, I would like to thank you for the good relationship that we have, the Czech Republic, with Jordan. Our relationship for 50 years already has been very good until now, and I'm very happy to continue and go on. After the visit of our President, Mr. Zeman, I would like to send the best regards from our President and hand you the gift from him.
Separately, Prime Minister Abdullah N'Sour met with his Czech counterpart, Bohuslav Sobotka. N'Sour briefed his guest on Jordan's ongoing reform and other competitive advantages and spoke of the millions of refugees the kingdom is hosting, including Palestinians, Iraqis, Syrians, Yemenis and Libyans, amid lack of badly needed international support. N'Sour also reiterated that the Palestinian issue would remain the source of all trouble in the region unless a fair and comprehensive solution is reached according to international legitimacy. Sobotka praised the existing friendship between the Czech Republic and Jordan and acknowledged the key role the kingdom could play in reviving Palestinian-Israeli peace talks, as well as in reinstating regional security and peace. In a meeting with members of the National Committee for Human Resources Development, His Majesty the King underlined the important role of the committee in designing an integrated strategy capable of producing qualified human resources ready to work and compete in the marketplace. During the meeting, in the presence of Her Majesty Queen Rania, King Abdullah offered his full support to the committee in its efforts to bring outcomes that would help address the challenges facing the education and human resources sectors. The meeting listened to a briefing by the committee chair, Wajih Hawais, on a strategy extending from 2016 to 2025, aiming to upgrade human resources needed for the different education levels through training programs, reforming the vocational sector, and assessing shortcomings facing professionals in both the public and private sectors. His Majesty had sent a letter to Prime Minister Abdullah N'Sour in March, directing him to establish a national committee to design a system for human capacity building as an urgent national priority. A royal decree has appointed Senator Faisal Aqif Al-Fayez as Senate President effective as of today. Al-Fayez replaces Abdurraouf Al-Rawabdi, who was appointed as Senate President in 2013. Palestinian officials reacted warmly to suggestions to calm Israeli-Palestinian violence by putting Al-Aqsa Mosque site under constant video monitoring. Following talks in Amman yesterday between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and His Majesty the King and other senior officials, Kerry sketched out steps he hopes may ease tensions over the Al-Aqsa compound, including a 24-hour video surveillance at the site and proposed by King Abdullah. Kerry said camera surveillance could be a game changer in discouraging anybody from disturbing the sanctity of the area. The Palestinian Authority said Kerry failed to address the main issue, and that is the criminal acts by Israel against the Palestinian people. Arrangements for installing the cameras have not yet been discussed in detail, and many questions remain, including when the system will go into effect and who will do the monitoring.
The American Foreign Minister Kerry came to the region with the goal of putting out the flames that we are seeing in all of the Palestinian towns. He has not been successful in containing the situation, as he declared in bringing tools to stop this uprising.
Israel's policy of killing Palestinians they claim attempted to stab security personnel continues. 2 Palestinian youth were killed today. Israeli paramilitary police in the West Bank city of Hebron shot dead a Palestinian girl who they say drew a knife and approached them, shouting after they asked her to identify herself. But witnesses said the girl was a student carrying only a backpack, adding that they heard over 10 bullets fired. They said the girl was shot in the face and left to bleed on the ground near the Ibrahimi Mosque. Earlier in the day, a 22-year-old man was shot by an Israeli settler in Sa'ir Valley near Hebron after the settler also claimed he attempted stabbing him. The Ministry of Health said Azam Shalade was shot by 5 bullets all over his body, including the neck and abdomen. He remains in hospital. As part of ongoing diplomacy to halt Israeli violence against Palestinians, the Palestine Liberation Organization's Secretary General, Saeb Erekat, held talks in Cairo with Egyptian officials. In a meeting with Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri, the two sides addressed international steps needed to confront Israel's escalated aggression in the occupied territories. They also discussed recent Israeli violation at Al-Aqsa Mosque. Violence in Jerusalem, the occupied West Bank and the Gaza Strip in recent weeks has left at least 52 Palestinians shot dead by Israeli soldiers. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State continued to discuss the Syria crisis over a telephone conversation. A statement by the Russian Foreign Ministry said the discussion was requested by the United States. The statement said Lavrov and Kerry discussed the prospect of a political solution to the crisis with the involvement of the Syrian authorities and the so-called patriotic opposition supported by the international community. Earlier, Lavrov said the Kremlin wants to see elections in Syria. This report has more.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the Kremlin wants to see Syria get ready for parliamentary and presidential elections. The announcement comes nearly 1 month after Russia launched airstrikes against Islamic State targets in Syria in support of President Bashar al-Assad's government. Lavrov also said Russia would be willing to help Western-backed Free Syrian Army rebels with Russian air support if it knew where they were.
We are ready to give air support to patriotic opposition as well, including the so-called Free Syrian Army. But we need to get in contact with the people who have the authority to represent certain armed groups that are fighting against terrorism, among other things.
Moscow and Washington have butted heads over a political transition of power in Syria, with Washington saying a solution must see Assad removed from power. But the latest move could be a sign that Russia is beginning to use its increased influence in Damascus to reach a political settlement.
A Russian lawmaker who met Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in Damascus today said the priority in Syria is to fight terrorists before holding elections. The parliament deputy Sergei Gavrilov, however, added that Assad is ready to call parliamentary and presidential polls if necessary. The lawmaker's remarks are the first indication of Assad's response to Russia's call for a new election. The Syrian state news agency Sana reported Assad's meeting with a visiting Russian delegation and quoted him as saying that the elimination of terrorist group would lead to the political solution that both countries, Syria and Russia, are seeking. Meanwhile, the U.S.-led coalition carried out 22 airstrikes against Daesh targets, most of them near Iraqi towns. 8 strikes were around Kesk, while 5 strikes near Ramadi hit Daesh tactical units and other targets, and other 5 near Sinjar hit fighting positions, assembly areas, and an army cache. Coalition planes also hit targets near Biji, Fallujah, and Mosul. Hundreds of refugees and migrants gathered in an open field in Slovenia in freezing temperatures as they waited to be registered before continuing their journey towards Western Europe. Migrants began crossing into Slovenia with a total of 50,400 who entered the country last Saturday after Hungary closed its border with Croatia. Some 10,000 people are currently waiting for processing in improvised camps, often in open fields. With the Hungary route now closed, bottlenecks have built up along new routes and border crossing points in the Balkans, and aid workers fear the humanitarian crisis will deepen as winter weather sets in. Several European leaders are due to meet in Brussels under the auspices of European Commission to discuss latest development in the migrant crisis. The meeting was called by Slovenian Prime Minister Miro Cerar, who said if Central and Eastern leaders would not find a solution today, then it would be the end of the European Union as such. British pilot Tracy Curtis Taylor, who set off an epic 13,000-mile solo flight from England to Australia earlier this month, has arrived in Jordan, her first Arab country stop in the region. The British aviatrix was at Marca Civil Airport earlier today and met with some school students who asked about her enthralling epic journey. Tracy is following the footsteps of Amy Johnson, the pioneering British aviator who became the first woman to fly solo from Britain to Australia in 1930. Raad Ptoush was at Marca Airport and filed this report.
This is her ride, an open cockpit 1942 Boeing Stearman that the British aviatrix set off to fly along a 13,000-mile route from Farnborough Airport in England to Sydney, Australia. Along this epic journey, her Boeing route has stops in 23 countries, and now her stop is in Jordan. The 53-year-old pilot spoke to school students cheering her arrival in Amman about some of the challenges she has faced during her flight.
I'm on the pedals, you know, the wind is in your hair.
Tracy also said she was so excited to visit one of the world wonders, the rose-red city of Petra, and enjoy a skydive over yet another wonder, the Dead Sea.
This is the first Arab country I've ever flown in with my Boeing Stearman, so this is very significant in lots of ways. And of course, historically, Britain and Jordan have a very good relationship, so it's wonderful to be here. Because I've already been skydiving here in Jordan over the Dead Sea. We've taken, 2 days to drive down to Petra and see, one of the most wonderful sights in the world. So I'm having rather more fun, I think, than Amy did in 1930.
Britain's ambassador to Jordan underlined the significance of Jordan being Tracy's first stop in the Middle East.
We have very important and close relationships between our two air forces as well as between our two peoples, and we are both leading aviation countries. I think it's very indicative that Jordan has not only a very distinguished airline, but also a female airline captain. I was on a Royal Jordanian flight to London the other day, and the captain was a Jordanian woman.
Tracy's flight route will take her next over the Arabian Desert, across the Gulf of Oman to Pakistan, through India and on to Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia and Indonesia, before crossing the Timor Sea to Australia. Her epic journey is inspired by Amy Johnson, the pioneering British aviator who became the first woman to fly solo from Britain to Australia in 1930. Raad Ptoush for the news at 10.
And to the world of fashion, Belgian designer Raf Simons is leaving Christian Dior after 3.5 years as creative director at the Parisian fashion house. Before taking up the role at Dior, Simons was a menswear designer and creative director at Jill Sander and was famous for his precise, unfussy designs. Simons said he is leaving the famous fashion house to focus on other interests in his life, including his own brand. In a statement, Dior said that Simons has decided to leave for personal reasons and clarified that the collection presented in Paris earlier this month was Simons' last for the house. Simons' successor at Dior has yet to be identified and a search is to be conducted. The MotoGP title race will go down to the last race after Dani Pedrosa won a dramatic Malaysian Grand Prix that saw championship leader Valentino Rossi clash with Marc Marquez, finish third and have his point lead reduced to 7. After the race, organizer gave Rossi 3 penalty points, which will see him start at the back of the grid for the title-deciding final race of the series at Valencia. With 14 laps remaining, Rossi was fighting with current world champion Marc Marquez for third place when he moved his leg out against Marquez's machine, sending the Spaniard into the gravel. Romania's Simona Halep kicked off her campaign for a maiden WTA final title with a 6-love, 6-3 victory over US Open champion Flavia Pennetta in the opening match of the 8-woman season-ending tournament. The Romanian moved effortlessly around the court and withstood Pennetta's attempt to get back into the contest. The Italian played more like she had on her way to a stunning victory in New York last month in the second set, but her resistance ended in a marathon 8-game when she dropped serve to trail 5-3 after staving off 3 break points. And finally, relatively cold weather continues for the rest of tonight with southwesterly moderate to brisk winds and more showers expected. Tomorrow, relatively cold conditions prevail with a continued chance for thundery rain, while winds will be southwesterly moderate to brisk. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect moderate conditions tomorrow with northerly moderate to brisk winds and choppy seas and possible rain. The weatherman warns of flash floods and low-lying areas and slippery roads. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And in the news, these are a recap of our top stories. King Abdullah renews concern over the status quo of Al-Haram al-Sharif and the escalation of violence in Jerusalem's holy sites during a meeting in Amman with Czech Prime Minister Bohuslav Sobotka. Israeli soldiers shoot 2 Palestinian youths, one of them a schoolgirl who died of her wounds near the Ibrahimi Mosque, and continued claims that the youth attempted to stab security members. And British pilot Tracy Curtis Taylor, who set off an epic 13,000-mile solo flight from England to Australia earlier this month, arrives in Jordan on her first stop in an Arab country. And with this we come to an end. I'm Farah Ajlouni. Thank you for watching and have a good night.